What makes a great leader? There's an open leadership role at your company. You've got a great team and you want to give one of them a shot to step up, but who's got what it takes? Should it be Kendall, Shiv, Roman? Oh, wrong succession. My bad. This is the Culture Clinic, where my co-founder Skay and I are relentlessly learning from HR experts how to build a culture where people love to work. My name is Joe. I'm a co-founder here at Guusto, and today we're joined by Kwesi Thomas, an HR expert in rewards and recognition. Kwesi, let's talk about succession planning and leadership development.
Nice. Sounds like a fun topic.
Okay, today's topic, finding your next leaders, succession planning and leadership development. Kwesi, to kick things off, what would you say your best quality as a leader is? And what's your worst?
Wow. Start with the worst. I think for me, the worst is I have a tendency to not to follow up enough with people. So, very good at setting priorities. And then those bottom 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 priorities, I let them slip too long. And then, while for me, it might be okay if the team gets lost, I think, waiting for a direction for things that I've kind of put a hold on. So I think for me, really trying to make sure I've gotten myself out of the way of the team and give them the freedom to execute without me. Sometimes I think I put myself in the way too much. So that's probably the worst. And probably the best. I think I do a decent job of letting people understand where we're going. Like, they understand where I'm trying to get to and how I think. Every time I meet a new employer or a new person working with me, I try to tell them, I want you to make 10 decisions. If you get 8 right, amazing. If you got 7 right, doesn't matter. But we'll talk about the 3 we didn't get right, and we'll get better. So we'll get better and better, so we're making more similar decisions together. And I really am okay with that. I want the team to be able to make decisions and to do things that they are experts at. I think for me, if I'd say I had something I'm really good at, is letting them be good at what they do. I don't need to be, better than or be the expert in the room if they're the expert.
So it sounds like you're good at sort of setting the vision and letting people run and flex the muscles that they have. And
it's funny, Joe. It was something I struggled with when I first started became a leader. Like, as an analyst, when I was working, as an individual contributor, I was really good at some things, and somebody thought, hey, that person should be a manager or a team lead. But the things I was really good at were things like spreadsheets and project plans and things I could knock out and that, would impress everyone how quickly I could do those things. And as a manager, I found it was really hard, or as a leader, to not be the person doing those things. And so I try to turn that weakness into a strength and be like, I'm going to empower people to be smarter than I am, or be able, and just be there to help remove the roadblocks, help navigate them, help them go in the right direction.
Yeah, was that a skill you really had to work on, sort of not trying to do the thing and letting the people that report into you do the thing?
Yeah, it took a long time for me to figure that out, because it was easier for me to do the report or pull the data, do the analysis myself, or whatever that was, especially when it got down to spreadsheets. It was much easier for me to do it myself. So it took a long time to figure out that, to let that go. And I was much better at helping people take what I knew and then applying it to what they knew and accelerating them. So that took a long time. I'll say it was a frustrating first few years of a leader or as a manager.
Yeah, it can be a slippery slope as well, right? Where you sort of set an environment where direct reports feel like they should just come to you to get things done, and then basically their work just rolls up to you. It's something we see, all the time with leaders, right?
Yeah, sometimes people just take their hands off and they're like, why am I doing this? You're going to redo it anyway, right? So yeah, it took a while, but I think for me, that what was my biggest weakness, I think, is probably my bigger strength now, is I am very comfortable taking my hands off and being like, if you struggle with this, or if there's a roadblock, come, I will happily help work through it with you, but it's yours to run with. You know how to do this, right?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about myself and my journey as a leader, and some things I do well and some things I don't do well. One, I think I care about people personally and really, want them to succeed both in career and in life. And similar to you, I really do try and give people space to own projects and just not really micromanage. And I also think that with that, that's kind of my double-edged sword, and where, I feel like I can improve is in the area of accountability. Sometimes I just let people run, and I assume unless they're coming to me, that the thing will get done, or they've got their hands on the wheel on this project. And, I may not double back to sort of like check that the progress is being made. And then, in many instances, it's all gravy, but there are times where maybe the thing doesn't get done. And, in those instances, I feel like maybe I needed to have a better process around accountability. How do you think about accountability, Kwesi, and kind of like setting the stage for people, letting them run, but then making sure that there is accountability at the end?
Yeah, for me, I learned again, not something, but learned for me was trying to set try to set the expectations or the things I want to hold you accountable to up front. So it was something that's part of, here's the project. It's also, here are the 3 milestones I'd like to see along the way, or here's how I'd like to get updates, or here's how I'd like to know how it's going, because it was easy for me to let those things slip, right? And then at the end be like, well, I was hoping for 1, 2, 3, and you gave me 4, 5. All right. But I never kind of checked in along the way because it was easier for me to focus on all the other work that we were doing. And so I found if I set it up with the person up front, then they knew what to expect. And I also knew what to expect. I knew that at the 3-week mark, I get a proper update where I could, focus on it for that hour or 2 hours, whatever it was, make sure it was on track, and then go back to doing whatever else I was doing. So I think for me, learned behavior was to set the expectations that I was then holding you accountable to up front.
Yeah, that's great advice. You're almost like setting the social contract or setting the contract in advance, and then people know what to expect.
Yeah, and for me, it was the secret for that was not just the final outcome; it was the milestones in between, or the how I wanted to be updated along the way, right? And so I think if we set those things up front, then both parties now have a way to navigate this project or this expectation in a way that works for both.
So I want to circle back to something you said, which is you were obviously an individual contributor that was excelling in your role. And as a result, you got, promoted into leadership, which can work and also sometimes does not work, right? And so for you, what's a clear sign that an employee has leadership potential?
I think if they can if people, and I think we want to be careful to define leadership and management. I think people can manage. They can make sure that the trains are running on time. That doesn't mean that they can lead, and to me, there's a big difference there. Lead, to me, involves some sort of setting of direction or setting of strategy or doing some other piece of the leadership of that role where people have to follow you to a place that they haven't gone yet, or through a new project or a new product or a new widget, whatever it is. And so they've got to follow you somewhere. And to me, that attribute is somebody who's able to do that, even in the day-to-day work, where other people will look to that person for direction or look to that person for, okay, they're going left. Maybe we should all try to see if left works. And it's like, to me, that's what I look for is, are they setting an example that other people are willing to follow? It's a big one for me.
So there might be instances where you see that people are naturally gravitating to these people for support and mentorship while they're in sort of an individual contributor role.
Correct. And that'll usually, and for most workplaces, that's kind of obvious sometimes, where that's the person people will lean towards or go to, not just for, hey, that person knows how to do a pivot table in Excel, but that person will have the advice to get my project unstuck, right? Or that person may have given me advice from who to talk to get this through. And so that leader, for me, leaders almost announce themselves by how others treat them in the workplace and how they carry themselves in relation to others in the workplace, not just their own work. And that's been a failure for many years in business, is we promoted people based on how they do their own work. And when you become a manager or a leader, it's not about your own work. It's about helping other people do their work, right? And so I think looking for that in people helps you really find good leaders.
And do you think there's a correlation between a good leader and someone who is not afraid to propose ideas?
If they can follow the ideas through. If to me there's double edged. I think if they can propose ideas and have the confidence to have a vision of something that doesn't exist, I think it's one of the great aspects of a good leader. But to be able to take that idea and at least set the foundation or have a plan for how that becomes real, I think you need to have that as well. Otherwise, it's just more ideas that can't be executed, right?
Right.
That makes sense from a complete off base there.
No, I think that makes sense. I mean, to some degree, I think there are visionary leaders, people that have ideas, and then they may not actually know how to execute on the idea, but they do know the skills that are required to execute on the idea and bring the right people in to sort of like execute on that vision. So maybe to your point, they have the plan. The plan is getting the right people in place.
Right. As I say, you said it way better than I did, but that's exactly what I was trying to infer, is that they can't just be, I have an idea and it falls. I have an idea and here's a way that can come to life, whether it's myself or other people or whatever that is. But they have to have a way to bring it to life. Otherwise, it's just more ideas.
Sometimes we can sort of spot great leadership qualities in somebody and we see them as a future leader. And so with that, how do you create clear pathways to leadership for employees? And then, are there any strategies that you can use to encourage their growth?
Two things. One, I think you have to invest in helping them develop the actual leadership skills, whether that's in courses or opportunities to be mentored while they're leading, not just giving them projects, but have someone help them through the skills they need to be a leader. And that could be done through, again, teaching or mentorship. I think that's paramount in becoming a leader. I think that if you don't do that, you're just hoping that they're going to be good when they become a leader. There are other ways of doing this. There are people who would suggest give them stretch projects, give them assignments that they can lead. Those are all, I think, good ways of giving them practice as a leader, but without someone who's actually giving them advice or correcting or encouraging as they go through that leadership experience, it's almost like, we'll see how they do, right? And so I do think, projects, assignments are important, but with the right support. And usually in companies, there are opportunities, and it's not just projects. Sometimes there's secondments. Sometimes there's people who are away for other reasons that need to be backfilling. There are ways to give opportunities for people to step up as the leader that I think companies should continue to explore. And lastly, the one that I really enjoy doing is there are things on my plate, especially if they're on my team, that they can pick up and participate in or lead, right? Where they might lead the weekly meeting or they might lead the weekly stand-up as the person responsible for it, where that gives them a chance to be accountable for that, right? So 1, mentorship and training, 2, opportunities through projects, et cetera, and 3, if you can delegate some of the things that are on your plate as a leader that they can pick up and develop in, then great.
Yeah, I love some of those ideas, especially the idea where you can, assign an individual contributor as the leader of this meeting or the leader of this stand-up. And it makes me think that it does a few things. One, right, it helps to develop the leadership muscle for those people. And then I also think that it's just creates a generally more inclusive environment when it comes to ideas, where it's not always sort of people talking to the leader and the leader becomes almost like a contributor of the group. I think it can kind of create a more relaxed environment where ideas can, free flow.
I said all harder to do, easier to say, but I think if you can do them and work through them, you can build leaders, which I think they need to be built. They don't just magically appear.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk about mentorship, do you think about, hey, if there's a new hire, assigning a mentor to that new hire? What other examples of sort of a defined mentorship program have you seen be effective in companies?
Northside way back when had a leadership course that was a multi-month course that people took in stages to become a leader. It was called Leadership Edge. I think that was the name of it, if I remember correctly, that I still to this day have some materials I pick on from. There was also a cohort of junior employees that we put in a program together. And that cohort did projects or rotated through different departments and rotated through different opportunities while having a mentor. That was very structured, took a lot of effort, but they were building leaders for their future. That was a very good program. And others I've just seen, as you have a person who you're identifying as a leader or who's about to become a manager or a team lead, you partner them with someone who has been a leader and a manager for some time, who can help with how do I handle this tough conversation? How do I handle this in the one-on-one? This person's been taking a lot of vacation. Like, how do you navigate these conversations that they haven't had to do before? and someone who can give them advice on that. I think that's at its basic form, that mentorship relationship works really well for new leaders.
Okay, so with that, how do you do succession planning well? And are there some do's and don'ts for leaders?
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of every company aims to do succession planning well. It's very hard to do because you're planning for what ifs, and the what ifs are kind of almost never ending. The do's and don'ts, don't do it. Like do the succession planning. You need you need some way of identifying not just talent who can. For me, this is not about identifying talent that can succeed that your role or that one role. But for me, most of the time, the talent you're identifying can succeed in a number of roles, right? Outside of the actual specialization of skills, like the accountant might have to succeed as an accountant. But I think as you're doing succession plan, you're identifying people within your teams who have the ability to lead or to step into leadership in the future, and you're going to invest into them. And to me, that's the best outcome. The disaster planning, that's a different. I'm not talking about disaster planning where you have to replace a whole bunch of leaders for a very disaster reason. That you should be doing anyway. But truly succession planning, I think you're looking for people who can build into the next role. The danger is a lot of those people are also going to be attractive to other companies and other jobs as you build them. But that, to me, that's part of the journey, right? You're going to build people so that hopefully they are ready for the roles that you need, but understand that you're also building them for the roles that they may want to go to elsewhere. And that's part of the succession planning.
Yeah. And you got to be okay with them moving on to an opportunity that helps them grow, right? Especially if you can't offer that opportunity.
100%.
And we've seen it here where people have outgrown their opportunity here at Guusto, have moved on to take other opportunities, and then a few years later have actually come back. And it's been really cool to see that.
Amazing. That's what you kind of want out of those programs, succession planning. I think when growth, succession planning takes on one slightly different element, and that's you should be also looking at what your company needs at its next stage. So if you're currently 50 employees and you're on the path to being 100, you're not just succession planning for the roles you have today. You've got to plan a bit for the roles you need at 100, right? There are other names for it, but at its true form, you're still planning who do you need, who do you have currently, what they need to develop so they can be in the roles that you need next, right? So I think as what these hyper growth companies, these fast growing companies, if you're growing quickly, you're also building the people internally who can take the jobs you don't have yet, right? You may have a sales team that only has one head of sales and everybody else reports to them right now. At 100, you're going to have 2 sales managers and start building towards 2 sales managers, right? And hopefully internally.
Okay, and so how do you handle it when you promote someone to a leadership role, but it doesn't really work out? And is it ever possible for that employee to stay at the company and thrive?
I can only think of one example where I've seen a person go into a leadership role, and then the person self-identified and said, "Hey, I'm much happier being an individual contributor. I don't want to do the one-on-ones, the management pieces of being in this role, and I want to stay. But I want but I'm happy here. I want to keep doing the job." And they were super valued. That person was in engineering, and then went back to being like a principal engineer, an engineer who was at a senior level. So, they didn't get demoted in any way on paper, but they became an engineer that was not handling people problems anymore or people management anymore, right? Worked out really well because that person had a ton to offer. They had a ton of historical knowledge and institutional knowledge of in the code, and so they were able to help a lot of people. But they self-identified that wasn't right for them. I haven't seen it work often. That's the one time I can remember seeing it work well. Often when you promote people into roles that become a manager, if it isn't working, it's they're not right, or we haven't invested enough in helping them become a manager. And so I would try really hard to invest into their development to get them to where you want them to get to. And usually they can get there. And if they can't, then you have an honest conversation. If they're ready to take it on, to go back to an IC role or take on something else, okay. Most people will say, I'm a manager now. It looks great on my resume, and I can find other manager jobs in the world. So it's really hard to keep them.
Yeah, you got to think it's got to be tough to walk someone back from being a manager back to an individual contributor at the same company.
I'll be honest, if you've got a culture of people, a true people culture where people are, just encouraged to do their best work, and they're, the titles and who reports to who is less, it's still there, but it's not what drives the company. I think it's possible. I've been around. I'll be an example. I've been around Guusto's culture quite a bit, and I think people would embrace it, and kind of always celebrate it in your culture. Kind of go, okay, that person understood it wasn't right for them, it was right for the company, but they're still an amazing person and an amazing contributor to the company. So they're going to do a role they're going to contribute well in.
Totally. Yeah, and I think it should be that way, right? And management is not for everyone. Leadership is not for everyone, right? There are a whole new bag of challenges, and it's just a completely different way of thinking. And so someone may think they want to be a leader / manager, and then when they're in the role, they realize like, yeah, I could get better at this, but I really don't love it. Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with going back and just being great at the thing that you do.
Yeah. If I nerd out a bit on total rewards theory for a second, I don't know, rewind 7-10 years ago, and when you built your salary scales, they went basically administrative, individual contributor, and then you had to become a team leader or manager, or your salary was stuck at whatever that top of that IC bracket was. And you had to become a manager, become a director, become a VP. And that's how we built total rewards in the past. And over the last, let's call it 7-ish years, we've seen more and more people build scales where there's an IC scale that goes up, and there's a management scale that overlaps to some extent, but it's a separate scale that allows the ICs to go up past where management of people starts. And I think that's the right thing. I think, it creates the opportunity for people who are just really good at at this specialty they're in to continue to build and add value to a company without adding on people management. And I hope more and more companies embrace that when they're building their salary scales and their job levels.
Totally. I think it's the right move, right? And still, a major driver for turnover is bad managers, right? Like people don't want to work for bad managers. And so if the only way to make more money and quote unquote progress in your career is to become a leader and manager, but you don't love it, you don't have the skill set, we're going to continue to sort of promote managers that are not very good. And as a result, people are going to leave. Right. And so if we can encourage people to continue to grow in their career within the lane that they're in and the skill set that they love, I think we're going to sort of triage folks into, the lane that they should be in.
Totally.
Cool. I have nothing more to say on the topic. If you want to build a culture that motivates your employees to grow into great leaders, check out Culture is the Ultimate Advantage, our free guide to turning your culture into your company's greatest strength. Click the link in the description to get your copy. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And don't forget, recognize someone for a job well done today. Mucho gusto.